What if I told you that some of the biggest secrets about the British royal family only came out after they were gone? The crown, the jewels, the palaces, we see all that. But behind closed doors, these royals lived lives that would shock you. Today, we're diving deep into 23 shocking revelations about British royals that only came to light after their deaths. 1. Queen Victoria's secret crush on her servant. We all know Queen Victoria mourned Prince Albert for 40 years after his death. She wore black, withdrew from public life, and seemed devoted to his memory. But here's what historians discovered after her death. Victoria might have had romantic feelings for her Scottish servant, John Brown. After Victoria died in 1901, her children, especially her son, the new King Edward VII, tried to erase all evidence of John Brown from history. They destroyed photographs, removed his image from paintings, and burned letters. Why would they do that if it was just an innocent friendship? Journals and letters that survived reveal Victoria called Brown pet names, gave him unusual privileges, and spent hours alone with him daily. Rumors at the time suggested they secretly married, though there's no proof of that. What we do know is that their relationship was so close, it scandalized the court. The Queen even requested that Brown's photograph and a lock of his hair be buried with her. Her family reluctantly agreed, but hid these items under her wedding veil so no one would see. Victoria took the full truth of that relationship to her grave, but the evidence suggests it was far more than just a professional arrangement. 2. Prince Albert Victor's Jack the Ripper connection. Here's a dark one. Prince Albert Victor, Queen Victoria's grandson, died of pneumonia in 1892 at just 28 years old. He was second in line to the throne, engaged to be married, and by all accounts living a privileged royal life. But after his death, some truly wild theories emerged. Some historians and conspiracy theorists suggested that Prince Albert Victor might have been Jack the Ripper, the infamous serial killer who terrorized London in 1888. Others claimed he wasn't the Ripper himself, but was involved in covering up the crimes to protect someone in his circle. The theories got so widespread that the royal family had to deal with these accusations decades after his death. Modern historians have largely debunked these claims, showing that Albert Victor was actually in Scotland when several crimes occurred. But here's what is true. He did frequent questionable establishments in London's East End and was caught up in a scandal involving a male brothel. The royal family worked hard to suppress information about his private life. Documents that might have cleared things up were destroyed or sealed. The Jack the Ripper connection is probably false, but the fact that people believed it shows his reputation was damaged enough to make it seem possible. 3. King Edward VII's elaborate love life. King Edward VII, who ruled from 1901 to 1910, was known during his lifetime as a ladies' man. But after his death, the full extent of his affairs became clear, and wow, it was even more extensive than people thought. Edward had a specially designed love chair created for his encounters, which is now in a Paris museum. He had affairs with actresses, socialites, and married women throughout Europe. Some historians estimate he had over 50 mistresses during his lifetime. What emerged after his death was how organized and accepted this all was. He had a group of male friends who helped arrange these meetings and cover for him. Hotels had secret entrances built specifically for his visits. His wife, Queen Alexandra, knew about most of it and apparently looked the other way, focusing on her own interests and children. Letters discovered later showed some mistresses received financial support from royal funds. One woman, Alice Keppel, the great-grandmother of Camilla, the current queen consort, was even allowed to visit him on his deathbed. The sheer scale of this parallel romantic life and how institutionalized it became only fully came to light through documents released long after his death. 4. Princess Margaret's forbidden love letters. Princess Margaret's tragic love story with Group Captain Peter Townsend was public knowledge. They couldn't marry because he was divorced, and she was next in line to the throne if her sister had no children. But what people didn't know was just how deep their love went. After Margaret's death in 2002, letters between her and Townsend were discovered, and some were eventually auctioned. These letters revealed a passionate, heartbreaking romance that lasted much longer than people realized. Even after she married Lord Snowdon, she and Townsend apparently maintained contact. The letters showed Margaret struggled with depression and felt trapped by her royal duties. She wrote about feeling like a bird in a gilded cage and questioned whether the crown was worth the sacrifice of personal happiness. Some letters suggested she considered leaving the royal family entirely. What's more shocking is that other letters were apparently destroyed by Margaret herself before she died, following royal protocol. We'll never know what those contained, but the ones that survived paint a picture of a woman torn between duty and love, who spent her whole life wondering what if. The full emotional toll of that decision only became clear after she was gone. 5. King George VI's severe health struggles. King George VI's Queen Elizabeth II's father was known to have health issues before his death in 1952, but the royal family kept the true extent of his suffering secret until well after his passing. What the public didn't know was that George VI was diagnosed with lung cancer in 1951. The family and doctors decided not to tell even the king himself about the cancer diagnosis. They removed his entire left lung, but told him it was for a blockage, not cancer. Can you imagine? After his death, medical records revealed he had been in excruciating pain for months. He had arteriosclerosis so severe that his doctors had considered amputating his right leg. He also suffered from what we now recognize as severe anxiety and probably PTSD from his traumatic childhood and the stress of unexpectedly becoming king. The smoking, which eventually killed him, was partly his way of coping with this anxiety. His famous stammer, portrayed in the king's speech, was just one visible symptom of deeper psychological struggles. Letters released decades later showed he knew he was dying, but kept up appearances for his daughter Elizabeth and the nation. 6. Princess Diana's secret recordings. We knew Princess Diana died tragically in 1997, and we knew she had a troubled marriage. But years after her death, secret audio recordings emerged that shocked even those who thought they knew her story. Diana had secretly recorded herself speaking to a voice coach, Peter Settlein, in the early 1990s. These tapes weren't meant for public consumption. They were therapy sessions where she spoke candidly about her life. After a legal battle, portions were released in 2004 and broadcast in 2017. In these recordings, Diana discussed her marriage in explicit detail, including her romantic relationships both before and during her marriage to Prince Charles. She talked about feeling unloved, about Charles's affair with Camilla starting much earlier than publicly known, and about her own struggles with bulimia and self-harm. Most shockingly, she discussed intimate details about the royal family that had been pure speculation before. She confirmed that Charles had told her he didn't love her. She revealed conversations with the Queen that showed even Her Majesty knew the marriage was doomed. These tapes gave us Diana's unfiltered voice in a way we'd never heard before. They confirmed that the fairy tale was even darker behind the scenes than anyone imagined. 7. Prince Philip's wartime secrets. Prince Philip served in the Royal Navy during World War II, and that was common knowledge. But after his death in 2021, more details emerged about just how active and dangerous his service really was. Philip rarely spoke about his war experiences, following the protocol of his generation. But documents and testimonies from fellow servicemen revealed he was at the Battle of Cape Matapan, one of the Royal Navy's most significant victories, where he operated searchlights under heavy fire at just 19 years old. He was mentioned in dispatches for his bravery. What was also revealed more fully was the complicated position of his family during the war. His sisters had married German princes, and some had connections to the Nazi Party. Philip was essentially cut off from his family during the war, fighting against the country where his sisters lived. He couldn't attend his sister Cecilia's funeral in 1937 because of the political implications. After his death, it became clearer how this divided loyalty affected him psychologically. Letters showed he struggled with questions about his family and his identity. The man who would become the Queen's consort for 70 years had fought against his own brothers-in-law and carried that complex history quietly his entire life. 8. Queen Elizabeth the Queen Mother's spending habits. The Queen Mother died in 2002 at age 101, beloved by the British public as a warm grandmotherly figure who had supported the nation through World War II. But financial records released after her death revealed a shocking secret. She died with debts of around $7 million, about $10 million, How does a member of the royal family who receives substantial income from the state and family trusts end up in debt? The revelations showed she lived far beyond her means throughout her life. She employed a staff of 50 at her personal residence, threw lavish parties, collected expensive art, and maintained properties at enormous cost. She apparently never looked at bills and would sign blank checks for staff to fill in. She bet heavily on horse racing, sometimes winning, often losing. Her champagne bill alone was astronomical. The Queen Elizabeth II quietly paid off these debts after her mother's death to avoid public scandal. What's fascinating is how well this was hidden during her lifetime. The public saw a sweet old lady. Behind the scenes was someone living like absolute royalty in a way that had become unsustainable even for royals. It revealed that even in the modern era, some royals maintained Victorian-era spending habits. 9. King Edward VIII's Nazi sympathies. Edward VIII abdicated in 1936 to marry Wallis Simpson, an American divorcee. That was the official story, and it was scandalous enough. But after his death in 1972, and especially when classified documents were released decades later, we learned something much darker. Edward, known as the Duke of Windsor after abdication, had significant Nazi sympathies. Documents showed he met with Hitler in 1937 and gave the Nazi salute. Captured German documents revealed Hitler's plan to reinstall Edward as a puppet king if Germany won the war. Edward apparently knew about and possibly supported this plan. British intelligence intercepted communications showing the Duke passed sensitive information to Nazi contacts. Some historians believe the government actually encouraged his abdication, not just because of Wallis Simpson, but because they knew he was a security risk and potentially treasonous. After the war, the royal family and government worked together to suppress this information. Files were sealed for decades. When they finally emerged, they showed that Edward's betrayal went far deeper than anyone publicly acknowledged. The love story of the century might have actually been a cover for removing a dangerous Nazi sympathizer from the throne. Churchill himself was reportedly involved in keeping Edward away from Britain during the critical war years. 10. Princess Alice's schizophrenia and heroism. Princess Alice of Battenberg, Prince Philip's mother, had an extraordinary life that was largely hidden until after her death in 1969. She was diagnosed with schizophrenia in the 1930s and was institutionalized against her will, subjected to experimental treatments, including a form of protoshock therapy recommended by Sigmund Freud. Her family essentially abandoned her in sanatoriums for years. But here's what came out later. During World War II, while living in Nazi-occupied Athens, Alice hid a Jewish family in her home for over a year, risking her life. When the Gestapo came to search, she used her deafness to her advantage, pretending not to understand their questions. This incredible act of courage earned her recognition as righteous among the nations by Israel in 1994, 25 years after her death. But why didn't anyone know during her lifetime? Partly because Alice was intensely private, and partly because the royal family was somewhat embarrassed by her mental health issues and eccentric lifestyle. After her death, it emerged that she had founded her own religious order, lived in near poverty by choice, and had a deeply spiritual life. The woman dismissed as mad by her family was actually extraordinarily brave, compassionate, and principled. Her full story rewrites what we thought we knew about Prince Philip's family. 11. King George III's mystery illness. King George III, who ruled during the American Revolution, was known as the Mad King during his lifetime. He had several mental breakdowns, talked to trees, and was eventually declared unfit to rule. For centuries, everyone thought he was simply insane. But here's the twist. In the 1960s, over 150 years after his death, scientists analyzed hair samples preserved from the king. They found extraordinarily high levels of arsenic. Further research in the early 2000s suggested he likely suffered from porphyria, a rare blood disorder that can cause symptoms that look like mental illness. The arsenic came from the medicines and cosmetics of the time. His madness might have actually been a physical illness made worse by the treatments meant to cure him. The straitjacket, isolation, and harsh treatments he endured were completely wrong for his actual condition. This revelation fundamentally changed how historians view his reign. He wasn't a weak-minded king who lost America. He was a dedicated ruler, suffering from an undiagnosed illness and being poisoned by his own doctors. His reputation was rehabilitated more than a century after his death. It's a reminder that medical knowledge can completely change how we judge historical figures. George III wasn't mad, he was sick. 12. Queen Victoria's possible depression. Queen Victoria's 40 years of mourning after Prince Albert's death in 1861 was seen during her lifetime as romantic devotion, but modern analysis of her journals, fully available only decades after her death in 1901, suggests something different. She likely suffered from severe clinical depression. Victoria's own writing describes symptoms we now recognize as major depressive disorder, inability to find joy in anything, persistent sadness, withdrawal from activities she once enjoyed, physical ailments with no clear cause, and thoughts that life wasn't worth living. She wrote about wanting to die to be reunited with Albert. What's striking is that she continued functioning as queen throughout this, signing documents, meeting with ministers, while being utterly miserable in private. Her journals reveal she often stayed in bed for days, crying uncontrollably. She lashed out at her children, particularly blaming her son Bertie, the future Edward VII, for Albert's death, believing the stress of dealing with Bertie's scandals weakened Albert's health. Victorian doctors didn't understand depression as a medical condition. They prescribed rest, travel, and avoidance of stress, none of which helped. If Victoria were alive today, she would likely receive treatment for depression and grief counseling. Instead, she suffered for decades, shaping the entire tone of an era with her mourning. 13. Prince John's hidden existence. Here's one of the saddest royal secrets. Prince John, the youngest son of King George IV and Queen Mary, was basically erased from royal history during his lifetime. He died in 1919 at age 13, and most people didn't even know he existed. John suffered from epilepsy and what was likely autism. In that era, these conditions were deeply stigmatized, especially in royal circles. The family moved him to a separate home on the Sandringham estate with his own staff, away from public view. He rarely saw his parents or siblings, only after his death, and really only when historians dug deeper decades later did we learn about his life. Photographs and letters revealed a sweet, loving boy who enjoyed spending time with his devoted nanny and seemed happy in his secluded world, unaware that he was being hidden. What's heartbreaking is that this was considered proper at the time, that a child with disabilities was an embarrassment to be concealed. The royal family never spoke of him publicly. His death was announced, but minimal details were given. It wasn't until decades later that historians pieced together his story, revealing the harsh attitudes toward disability in the early 1900s and the loneliness of a forgotten prince. 14. Wallis Simpson's possible intersex condition. Wallis Simpson, the woman for whom Edward VIII gave up the throne, died in 1986. And wouldn't you know it, even after death, she kept making headlines. Some of her medical records and biographies published posthumously suggested something remarkable. She might have had an intersex condition. Several doctors who examined her noted unusual physical characteristics. She apparently couldn't have children, not due to infertility in the typical sense, but possibly because of a condition called androgen insensitivity syndrome. Some accounts suggest she had ambiguous genitalia, which would explain why she had multiple marriages but never conceived. If true, this adds a whole new dimension to the abdication crisis. The Church of England and establishment were already opposed to Edward marrying a divorced woman, but if there were medical reasons she couldn't produce heirs, this would have been an absolute deal-breaker for a king, regardless of love. These revelations remain somewhat controversial because they're based on second-hand medical accounts and gossip, but they emerged through biographies and investigations after her death. Whether true or not, they show that even the most examined life in the world, a woman who caused a king to abdicate, still held secrets. Wallis Simpson remains mysterious even in death. 15. King Charles II's illegitimate children? Okay, let's go way back to King Charles II, who ruled from 1660 to 1685. Everyone knew during his lifetime that he had mistresses. That wasn't hidden. But the full extent of his illegitimate family only became clear through historical research done centuries after his death. Charles II officially acknowledged 12 illegitimate children by various mistresses, but DNA testing in recent years suggests there were many more. Some estimates put the number at over 20 children. Genealogists tracing royal bloodlines have found descendants all over England and beyond. What's fascinating is that Charles gave titles and money to his acknowledged illegitimate children, but there was apparently a whole other group he never publicly claimed. Documents discovered in various aristocratic family archives revealed letters and payments suggesting he financially supported other children in secret. Some of Britain's most prominent noble families, including the Dukes of Buccleuch, Richmond, and Grafton, descend from Charles II's affairs. Through DNA analysis and genealogical research completed in the 21st century, we now know that thousands of British people likely have Charles II as an ancestor. The merry monarch was even merrier than anyone realized. His genetic legacy spread through the British aristocracy in ways that only became clear with modern science. 16. Queen Anne's tragic pregnancies. Queen Anne, who ruled from 1702 to 1714, is often just a footnote in history books. But research after her death revealed one of the most heartbreaking stories in royal history. Anne was pregnant at least 18 times. Only 5 children were born alive and only 1 survived infancy, and he died at age 11. That means Queen Anne buried 17 children. Contemporary accounts mentioned her ill health but didn't detail the full extent of these losses. Medical historians analyzing records decades and centuries later believe she likely suffered from antiphospholipid syndrome, which causes recurrent miscarriages and stillbirths. This condition wasn't understood in her time. What compounds the tragedy is that Anne's inability to produce an heir changed British history. It led to the Act of Settlement in 1701, which brought the German House of Hanover to the British throne after Anne's death. The entire Georgian era happened because Anne couldn't keep a pregnancy. Letters and diaries released long after Anne's death show she was deeply depressed, as anyone would be after such losses. She gained weight, had difficulty walking, and many historians now believe she had severe chronic health issues beyond the pregnancy problems. 17. Prince Albert's progressive beliefs. Prince Albert, Queen Victoria's husband, died of typhoid fever in 1861. During his lifetime, he was seen as a proper, formal German prince who helped organize the Great Exhibition. But documents and letters released long after his death revealed he was remarkably progressive for his time. Albert wrote extensive private papers about social reform. He believed in improving workers' conditions, supported education for poor children, and advocated for better housing for the working class. He wanted to abolish slavery not just in British territories but globally. These were radical positions for a royal in the 1840s-50s. He also had advanced scientific interests. Albert corresponded with Charles Darwin and supported evolutionary research, which contradicted religious teachings of the time. He believed in meritocracy over aristocracy and thought the nobility should earn their positions rather than inherit them. Ironic for a prince. Victoria shared some of these beliefs, but she was more conservative. After Albert's death, many of his reform ideas died with him. Historians only discovered the full extent of his progressive thinking when his letters and papers were properly studied in the 20th century. He was ahead of his time, constrained by his position. If he'd lived longer, the Victorian era might have been very different. 18. Princess Charlotte's medical tragedy. Princess Charlotte of Wales, daughter of the future King George IV, died in childbirth in 1817 at just 21 years old. Her baby also died. At the time, it was treated as a tragic but not unusual occurrence. Childbirth was dangerous in the 1800s, but here's what came out later. Charlotte's death was completely preventable. Medical analysis of the case, conducted in the decades following, revealed that her doctor was incompetent. He'd been in practice for 50 hours straight, possibly drunk, and made catastrophic decisions. He refused to use forceps when the labor stalled after 50 hours. He performed repeated bloodletting, which weakened Charlotte dangerously. He didn't call for other doctors when complications arose, apparently because of professional pride. When Charlotte and the baby both died, there was a national outpouring of grief and anger. The doctor, Sir Richard Croft, was so devastated by his failure that he committed self-harm a few months later. Medical. Schools later studied Charlotte's case as an example of what not to do. Her death changed British obstetrics. Doctors became more willing to intervene in difficult births. 19. King Henry VIII's possible MacLeod syndrome. Everyone knows Henry VIII had 6 wives, executed 2 of them, broke with the Catholic Church, and became increasingly tyrannical. We've known that for centuries. But medical research published in 2011, over 450 years after his death, suggests a medical explanation for his personality change. Henry suffered a serious jousting accident in 1536 that left him unconscious for 2 hours. Brain injury experts now believe this likely caused traumatic brain injury. After this accident, Henry's personality notably deteriorated. He became paranoid, impulsive, and violent. Before the accident, he was considered a relatively reasonable king. Additionally, researchers analyzing historical descriptions of Henry's symptoms suggest he may have had the Kell blood type and possibly MacLeod syndrome, a rare genetic condition. This could explain why so many of his children with different wives were either stillborn or died shortly after birth. The syndrome causes fertility issues and can lead to personality changes and cognitive decline. His famous leg ulcers, obesity in later life, and increasingly erratic behavior all fit this medical profile. Henry VIII wasn't just a tyrant. He was possibly a brain-injured man with a genetic disorder, living in an era with no medical understanding of either condition. 20. Princess Margaret's stroke cover-up. Princess Margaret died in 2002, and the official announcement said she'd suffered a stroke. But in the months and years following her death, a fuller picture emerged of just how much she'd been suffering and how carefully the royal family had hidden it. Margaret actually had multiple strokes starting in 1998, 4 years before her death. She was partially paralyzed, had difficulty speaking, and was essentially confined to a wheelchair. But the palace released minimal information, maintaining the image of her as the glamorous princess even as she struggled. After her death, friends revealed she'd been deeply depressed about her physical decline. A heavy smoker and drinker for decades, her lifestyle had caught up with her. She had also suffered severe burns from a hot bath accident when she couldn't feel the temperature properly due to stroke-related nerve damage. What's particularly sad is that she became isolated in her final years. The party-loving princess died alone in her apartment, having pushed away many friends and family members. The palace only released the full extent of her health problems after her death. It revealed the gap between the glamorous public image and the tragic reality, something Margaret had dealt with her entire life. Really? 21. King Leopold II of Belgium's horrific legacy. Okay, Leopold II wasn't technically British royalty, but he was Queen Victoria's first cousin and deeply connected to the British royal family, so he counts. Leopold died in 1909, and while there were whispers about his rule of the Congo during his lifetime, the full horror only emerged after his death. Leopold personally owned the Congo Free State and ran it as a brutal forced labor camp. Documents that came to light after his death revealed that his regime killed an estimated 10 million Congolese people through starvation and disease. It was genocide. During his life, he managed propaganda carefully to appear as a philanthropist bringing civilization to Africa. After his death, missionaries, journalists, and historians exposed the truth. Photographs emerged showing people with hands cut off for not meeting rubber quotas. Testimonies described villages burned and families separated. What shocked people was how the British and European establishment had known, or at least suspected, and did nothing because they were making money from Congolese rubber. The British royal family had maintained warm relations with Leopold throughout. After his death, as the evidence mounted, this became deeply embarrassing. It revealed how complicit civilized Europe was in African atrocities and forced a reckoning with colonial violence. 22. Queen Elizabeth II's personal wealth. When Queen Elizabeth II died in 2022, people expected to learn details about her estate and wealth. What they didn't expect was quite how complicated and protected that information would be. After her death, it was revealed that the Queen's personal wealth was exempt from inheritance tax through a special arrangement with the government, a rule that applies only to the monarch. The Duchy of Lancaster, which provides the monarch's private income, was estimated to be worth over $650 million. But here's what shocked people. Full disclosure still hasn't happened. The royal family negotiated to keep the full details of her will private. Unlike ordinary citizens, we know Prince Charles inherited the bulk of the estate, but specific amounts remained secret. What did come out was that Elizabeth was privately very wealthy beyond the crown estate and public properties. She owned rare stamps, jewelry, artwork, horses, and property that was hers personally, not the crown's. The distinction between personal royal wealth and state-owned royal property became clearer after her death. 23. Prince Philip's sharp wit and mistakes. Prince Philip was famous for his gaffes during his lifetime, those moments when he said something inappropriate or politically incorrect. But after his death in 2021, the full collection of his comments, private jokes, and unfiltered opinions came to light through memoirs and interviews. Some were genuinely funny. He had a dry sense of humor and didn't take himself seriously, which was refreshing for a royal. He made jokes about how boring royal events could be and mocked pompous officials. In private, he was apparently hilarious and self-deprecating, but some comments revealed outdated attitudes about race, gender, and class that, while typical of his generation, were still shocking when compiled. The full list of his gaffes published after his death was jaw-dropping, asking Indigenous Australians if they still threw spears, telling British students in China they'd get slitty eyes, and countless other cringe-worthy moments. What emerged was a complex picture, a man who modernized aspects of the monarchy and supported hundreds of charities, but who never quite adjusted his private school 1940s worldview. He was simultaneously progressive in some ways and stuck in the past in others. The full Philip, warts and all, only became clear after he was gone. Which revelation shocked you most? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if this video taught you something new, hit that like button and subscribe for more royal history and secrets.